Dear colleagues, it is my great pleasure to greet everyone who has found the opportunity to come and join us here in our today's event. I would like to say a few words what we are going to do today and how exactly it's going to happen. Those who have been here several times already, you know that there is this structure called consortium, R4U, that is dealing with matters connected with recovery, reconstruction, and other matters directed towards facilitation of burden of debts on Ukraine, but also involvement of international financial resources. And Ukraine economy depends critically on that. I think that we do not need to even to mention this because it is clear without understanding. The members of our consortium is Dixie Group, member Center of Economic Strategy. You have Maria here. She will turn around. You'll be able to see her, but she's definitely here. Then Alexandra Batley, Institute of Economic Research and Political Consultations. I decided to introduce also myself, Igor Borokovsky, the head of management board of this institute. I'm now abusing my power because we're going to talk about corporate governance. So of course there might be certain analogies here, but it's just a political statement. And Institute of Analytics and Advocacy. Traditionally, our events take place in two parts. During the first part, we are going to discuss about the structural benchmarks and how exactly we are cooperating with international donors. In this particular case, we're talking about international financial institutions through which we get official financing. You know that there are lots of sources of non-official financing, various types of programs of charity. But in this particular case, we are talking about only official sources of financing. Our approach is very simple. We are looking at structural beacons and indicators, structural benchmarks. So we are talking about what has been performed, what hasn't been performed yet. It's our alternative point of view. Sometimes, well, not even sometimes, but pretty often our assessment is different from official ones. And our key idea is to see what has already been done and what hasn't been done and how much it's going to cost for Ukraine. Because if we do not do something, then there are immediately questions that arise connected with the frequency of receiving funds or even with reviewing of certain conditions. The second part of our today's agenda is a special topic. This time we selected a very interesting topic for Ukraine. It seems to me it's reform of the corporate governance. And our choice was pretty easy. As of now, the state sector in various spheres has domineering character, let's put it like that, even more so if you're talking about electricity, about energy, about banking system, about logistics, about infrastructure. And today, what is called economic resilience of Ukraine depends on it, and without it, it's pretty difficult to talk about possible scenarios of development of military political events. Strong rare, it's precondition that we will be able to withstand the front line, even though front line should be discussed in different dimensions, obviously. It is my great pleasure also to announce that our project is, in a way, I would say not very typical, but nevertheless, we have been receiving support for several years from the side of Renaissance Foundation, and I'm really happy to see here Dina Narezhna, our curator of the project, and the support is coming not only from Ukraine but also from Open Society Foundation. It's a central headquarters where certain activity is being coordinated. So it's a really great example that apart from, I would say, just humanitarian, political, social matters and so on and so forth, fund is also supporting something that is already similar to technical aid, and it is extremely important taking into account changes in our landscape. When USAID left us, when some other organizations reviewed their priorities, of course that it is extremely needed, and of course that it has to be done. And before we start, I would like to express my sincerest gratitude to Ukrainian defenders, those who enable our today's event here in the RARE, even though now the difference between RARE and frontline is somehow wake. And I also would like to express my gratitude separately to representatives of energy companies and utility companies, all those who are in this very complicated military, economic and nature circumstances trying to support what we call vitality, resilience and existence. Let's say, well, resilience. Resilience of life in Ukraine. Excuse me for being so blunt and so and to speak with such pathos, but still, this is the end of my introductory words, and let's get to our main blocks. The main block is Ukraine and International Monetary Fund, and we understand perfectly well that International Monetary Fund is extremely important donor for us, first and foremost politically wise. We call other donors, other international organizations focus on how we cooperate with International Monetary Fund, and in many cases try to coordinate their actions within some kind of wide platform with International Monetary Fund. It is my great pleasure to give the floor now to Maria Repko, the Deputy Executive Director of the Center of Economic Strategy, and I love this phrase. I very often start my moderation from it. Maria, please tell us whole truth. Well, maybe I will not tell you the whole truth, but I will tell you what is currently publicly available. I believe that lots of interesting things are happening behind the closed doors. Kristalina Georgieva visited us recently, and I think that we will find all the truth about these negotiations very post factum. But we already know something. In particular, we know about that program that exists and that we are committed to perform, and we already have certain non-performed benchmarks. Could we please get to our slides? So what hasn't been performed? We still do not have new head of customs office, even though we have certain progress there, and we are pretty optimistic concerning that. I think that sooner or later it will happen, and new head will be appointed. The reform will start working because it is extremely important for rule of law in Ukraine and for economic development. Then we also still do not have sectoral plans of public investments management, and it is actually one of the flagship, was and still is, while Ukraine is reconstructing, recovering, and it is extremely important to have public investments effective and to be in compliance with the strategic movements of Ukraine. We still do not have asset assessment benchmark performed, and concerning amendments of laws of way, by the way, the last one actually is business is very much against this benchmark, and I do believe that, well, I don't know whether it's good or bad that it has not yet been performed. It's still an open question for the discussion. We still have the opportunity for to perform securitization and mortgage bonds, mortgage, and with 4 months delay, but still it happened. The benchmark was performed on selecting and appointing members of the supervisory boards of state enterprises. It is benchmark 57. The next slide, please. But yes, about IMF, actually, the program is new program is more interesting than the old one. The old one we still monitor because of our habit, but it's interesting to monitor the negotiations that are going on. A new program for $8 billion. It was agreed in November, but when exactly the first tranche comes depends on so many conditions and requirements and political situations. So because for this program to start working, we need certain prior actions, so-called. These are those actions that Ukrainian government committed to do to launch this program. Mostly those actions are oriented towards so-called mobilization of revenues of state budget. It's elimination of benefit for VAT. It is also the matter of taxating parcels. It is matter of labor code. We know that in Ukraine, lots of people are private entrepreneurs, even though it's just a formality. It's It's a formal labor market, and also it is taxation for goods on digital platforms. So, concerning such prior actions, we do not have big progress here so far. These laws should be submitted to Verkhovna Rada. We do not need to adapt them so far, but they have to be at least submitted. So we are still waiting. If these laws are submitted, then in the nearest, I don't know, several weeks, maybe several number of weeks, it is difficult to say exactly when, Ukraine will get access to new program. And what is important that it will not only be $8 billion that are actually already included in this IMF program, but there's also this huge loan, unprecedented loan of over 90 billion euros that Ukraine has to get instead of Russian assets. Recently there was such an agreement, and so this loan is also connected to existence of the program with IMF. Political decisions might be different here, but formally we have such connection, and we can say that on the stake we have $115 billion for performing such prior actions. In general, it is needed for Ukraine. We see what is going on in the USA. We see that there will be no grants. We see that with weapons, we have huge questions. We see that money needed for all of this, Europeans allocated those 90 billion. Well, let's say it's unprecedented support. It's huge. It required huge focus from all countries in negotiations. It was not easy. So to rely on something that Europe will give us even more money, probably we still shouldn't do that. And Ukraine is still spending for its defense twice as less as Russian Federation, maybe even more than twice, because Ukrainian budget is 60-70 billion, Russian 150. So we need money, and the mobilization of internal resource is not just a requirement or a desire of International Monetary Fund. It is actually something that Ukrainian society has to agree with internally. We need resources for army. We unfortunately a big ally that provided us such resources at the beginning of the war is not relevant now. We do not have this big source of funds now, so that's why prior actions are important, not only from the point of view of receiving financial resource from donors, but also from the point of view of just managing public finances during the war. Thank you. And the floor is yours. Thank you, Maria. So I think that we can already have short conclusion that each time we have certain periods in our economic situations. The first period is economic situation, I would say, in the dimension of resilience, not to be victim of Russian aggression. Well, we are already, because they attacked us, but nevertheless, we are conducting successful, I would say, hostilities. And the second question connected with the mobilization of resources. So at the beginning, we mobilized all the resources to contradict Russian attacks, and now we need to mobilize also our internal resources to be able to create and to provide this resilience that we are talking about. Maria has mentioned a few words about the general situation, in particular about this unprecedented loan that we received from our European allies. We are really grateful for that. So that's why I would like to give the floor now to Mr. Vitaly Nabok, Senior Analytic of Politics and Data, Institute of Analytics and Advocacy, to highlight Ukraine and Ukraine Plan, Ukraine Facility. Thank you for giving me the floor. Hello, colleagues. Today I would like to tell you a little bit more of what was going on with Ukraine Plan in January of 2026. On the slide now you see 5 main statements. I would like to start and to finish with good things. First of all, I would like to mention that during 2025, through indicators of Ukraine Plan, we engaged more than 10 billion euros of external support from the European Union. And what is not the least important, 600 million, this is grants, so we do not need to return them. But generally, if to talk about 2025, then for us it was rather negative if to talk about the performance of our commitments in Ukrainian plan. In particular, one negative news is that we are actually in debt with lots of indicators, and I will tell you about that on the next slides. At the same time, at the beginning of this month, certain changes came into force concerning the forms of control for state audit fund and service and with the funds of Ukraine facility, and they will be able now to check the usage of such funds and how the companies are using such funds within the second component of this program. And at the same time, it's strengthening the cooperation of state audit service and other companies involved into this process. At the same time, we have this huge problem with not performing indicators. Since that moment when the European Commission led us not to perform some indicators because of this methodology of partial assessment. So partly some funds we can get without performance, and another part can be still withheld for 1 year and then they burn. So we are already in debt with 11 indicators, and I'm not talking here even about others from the first to the third quarter. The general number is already almost 4 billion euros. So imagine that if from our state budget just 1 month of life for our citizens is taken away, then this is the price that we are paying now for non-performed indicators. And another piece of news is that at the end of the first quarter, we might lose irrevocably already 300 million euros because we have been in debt already for 1 year with this indicator for filling the positions in a high anti-corruption court. The competition is on there right now. We hope that the results are positive and we will be able to commit with this and to get our funds. And as Maria and as Igor already mentioned, we are also moving towards this big decision on the European Union is this Ukraine support loan, a big decision for 90 billion euros. Among them, 30 billion will be given us as forming and supporting routine actions of our state, and 60 for military needs. I would like to get to more detailed information of what we didn't manage to do. From the first to the third quarter, we have several indicators. It is including members of staff of High Anti-Corruption Court, also 2 indicators concerning integrity of declarations and reform of digitalization of enforcement proceedings. And also in the third quarter, we are in debt with adopting legislation for electricity integration package. We understand that together it's already more than 1.3 billion euros. And to add to that, actually, the situation is deteriorating. If you look at the fourth quarter, then here we already have 11 non-performed indicators. And if we are talking about their, let's say, potential that might turn into funds, then we are now in debt with more than 2.6 billion euros. It's huge number and we need to deal with it somehow. And among such commitments, we have lots of matters about state service and energy and judicial system. You see everything on the screen. What I wanted to say, what is extremely important for us, that in majority of cases, those indicators that we have in debt, well, here we need actions of the parliament. They also cost more, but we need to work here on adopting draft laws. Good news is that with each such commitment, with each step, we have registered draft law. Bad news is that here we also need to have the parliament to work together to vote for this and to actually have the reform and funds for supporting our state budget. And actually several more decisions that's about national actually risk assessment that is already almost came to the client and nominated operator of electricity. If we are talking in general, the prospects for 2026, then we can say that as of now, in the first quarter, we do not have any commitment performed, but at the same time, we still have lots of commitments for the next quarters that potentially we need to take a look at and to be attentive here. To sum up, I would like to say that as of now, the situation with performing Ukrainian plan is significantly negative because we have lots of non-performed indicators and actually non-assessed resource. What we lose, it's almost 4 billion euros already. So that's why I would like to encourage all of us to be responsible and to treat it not as a next step, just to tick the box, but actually already to provide resilience for our budget system and actually support the main services for our population. Thank you. Thanks a lot, Vitaly. And for us to be able to finish our first part, we have certain questions. Actually, we are lagging behind a little bit today. So, colleagues, the question to you: how realistic it is to cover this gap in the nearest future? I understand that it's pretty philosophical question. Well, it seems to me that it's philosophical, but it's also the matter of cohesion of the parliament, because we are saying that the majority of decisions, that's about those commitments that Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine should work on. There are draft laws registered, so actually the biggest risk is in not voting or in some breaking or disruption of such voting, so we need to focus and to coordinate on that level. Okay, thank you, Maria. Well, actually, in IMF project, I see that politically it's different, extremely different, but I do not think that it's not realistic. Now is this moment when it has to be done and when politically difficult decision can be made. Thank you. Thanks a lot. And now we have this general vision of what is going on, and let's move to discussing our special topic. So let's have small change here. I would like to ask our guests that will participate in the discussion of the special topic to come here. Those who do not participate, please. Okay, those who are here, stay here. Well, you see, probably I need to work the president because I need to be the president because I love making fast decisions who should move there and go there. But well, now let's get to our special topic. Once again, I would like to say that the topic of corporate governance is extremely painful. For many years, I have been dealing with the matters of economic reforms in this amazing country, and I would like to say that the matter of corporate governance, especially if you're talking about big state companies or companies with a significant participation of the state, it always has lots of questions. And these are not only the matters of corruption, but the matter of effective priorities, the matter of normal functioning of such companies as economic agencies that should bring revenues. A lot has been said about some kind of social matters, but thanks God we not talking about this now, even though social aspects are still there. But we would really like all of this to work as a normal economic mechanism with all the results. So now let's talk about this complicated problem. Well, I was corrected a little bit, so I'm going to give the floor to Alexandra Batli, leading expert of Institute of Economic Research. So you basically have this topic, how to achieve success, reform of corporate governance, how to achieve success. Well, I put this question, but I'm not going to answer because I think that our panelists will answer this. Actually, the special topic in our monitoring has been done for many times already, but it's the first time when we repeat discussion. We discussed already this topic in December of 2024 as a special topic. Unfortunately, we are getting back to it, even though a lot has been done already. But what I have here on the slide, we are still there. In contrast to other reforms, a lot has been done on normative and legislative level, but somehow it is not working. The topic is still relevant for Ukraine because recently there was a scandal with Energoatom, and from time to time with other companies there are also scandals. There was scandal with Ukrenergo. So that's why the matter in legislation probably not, it's rather in implementation. And this is important for Ukraine because many state companies, many state companies exist, but not so many companies have corporate governance implemented. Many companies are losing money. Actually, companies are viewed and considered in Ukraine as important source of fiscal risks because they have losses. And many companies have certain commitments, so these are guarantees of government. Lots of companies have quasi-fiscal functions, and that's why in this report of Ministry of Finances about fiscal risks, a big part is dedicated to state companies. And actually, that's why IMF and the European Union is paying lots of attention in their indicators and structural beacons to this matter. And we were talking about this then, and I'm not going to list all those structural benchmarks for all these years, but the presentation for December of 2024, we had all these indicators and benchmarks, and we were, at that time, we were looking that practically everything was performed, something with delay, something with not. But actually, in the current program of IMF, it's with delay, but still the decision was adopted by the Cabinet of Ministers about the relaunch of supervisory board, and something is going on. But once again, I would like to mention here why do we need corporate governance? And here the CD tells us that actually effective governance is needed for us to decrease those fiscal risks, but the key thing is effective corporate governance consists of several elements. It's professionalization of a state as the owner, so there can be no good professional corporate governance if the owner is not a professional, so it's a state. It's effectiveness, transparency, and integrity of working of state enterprises. Once again, we are moving here to who's managing the enterprises when decisions are made. And the actual aim is to providing economic effectiveness, integrity, reporting. We know this very well. These are words that we mentioned in Ukraine very often, but we do not all understand them at the same way or implement what we need to implement. And what is important here, once again, the principles are divided into several key chapters. And the first one is the justification of state ownership. What is key here? The state has to clearly understand why it has this or that enterprise. If there is no answer to this question, then maybe we need to sell this enterprise if it's strategically not needed for us. Here we are moving to this matter of triage that has been discussed in Ukraine for more than 10 years already, and we cannot get to it. We cannot discuss it in equality form. Now Ministry of Economics is talking about this again. Let's hope that there will be certain actions here. The second thing is the role of the state. As I have already mentioned, the state should be a professional owner here. So what does it mean? That the owner should be informed, active professional, and to provide transparency and reporting of all these decisions. What is important here? Human factor. Unfortunately, human factor will be important here to effectively manage the enterprise, the state as the owner, but these are certain people in ministries should understand why do they need this enterprise, how to do it correctly, how supervisory boards should work, what KPIs should be defined. Without this understanding, effective corporate governance is impossible. The next one is a level playing field. We do not create special rules in comparison with a private business. These are OECD principles. Of course, sometimes state companies perform such functions that deteriorate their competition on the market, but it's already a little bit different matter. Once again, it's a matter of the policy of the state. Equal attitude to shareholders. If state enterprise has one more or several owners, very often it happens, for example, NBU is the ownership of such companies. There should be equal treatment, and there should be impact of all the owners. The transparency and forming the information is also important. Roman will talk about this. Also, who should be in supervisory boards? There should be professional people there, and what is very important for Ukraine, people who are not afraid to make correct decisions, and they do not just sit and wait for the owner to do something wrong. And supervisory boards should be pretty capable to say no when there is a pressure from the side of the state, for instance. Because once again, we have various owners in the state, we have professional owners, we have not very professional, there are certain political interests that might be taken into account, so it matters who are members of the supervisory board. And what is interesting is sustainable development. We do not forget about ecology, about sustainability. So actually, state enterprises can be leaders here and show examples to private companies. Just several examples. Ukrzaliznytsia got supervisory board in autumn this year, and that's really great. State banks have supervisory board. Some of them relaunched itself recently. And the supervisory board, the Ukraine Forest of Ukraine, was formed also in January. So those enterprises that are here, these are actually from the report of about fiscal risks of Ministry of Finances. There are top in revenues or losses, so it's not have everything here, just key ones. In energy, we have a total relaunch of supervisory boards. Ukrposhta is now selecting several independent boards. Ministry of Development also mentioned that there will be created a supervisory board in Ministry of Seaports of Ukraine. So I see that lots of supervisory boards are being relaunched at the same time. It's pretty big pressure on the state as the owner, especially when we have some intersection in function. It is also huge pressure on the Ministry of Economy, because actually in majority of cases, Ministry of Economy is playing key role. And it is important that the Ministry of Ukraine should control, Cabinet of Ministers should control all of this. The decisions are made by the Cabinet of Ministers. So once again, we need to communicate with the recruiters they hire to give their vision, who should be in the supervisory board and which functions these people should perform, what are the expectations from such people. So that's why, as a result, there will be a little bit different approach maybe for the supervisory board. So in fact, a recruiter, when he or she is forming conditions to the members of the supervisory board, especially it's about this current resolution that was reviewed. There are lots of things mentioned there. A recruiter should communicate with the owner and to understand the expectations from these people, what exactly they need to do. And when we are talking once again about the recruiters, then it's important here who pays, because for me, frankly speaking, it was strange that the state enterprise should pay this recruiter. But it's also a matter of control from the side of the owner, maybe, because state enterprise that is not interested in quality supervisory board, there might be some violations, and they might hire not quality recruiters. The EBRD has all representatives, so they take part as some kind of advisors. I don't remember exactly how they are called, but basically there are advisors. It's just I remember that in 2019 when people were appointed to the supervisory board, but it was like advice, but still this advice had almost veto, meaning so sometimes they blocked appointing of several people. Lately, I am told that this voice is not so loud. They already do not have this veto. So Ministry of Economy, Ministry of Finance, and the Cabinet of Ministers and representatives of the owner, they actually can adapt for the they can appoint for the supervisory board people, even with certain regards and comments from the side of international financial organizations. So, but of course, we want the state to be the subject here as well, to be the entity. So Now, about what is happening in Ukraine right now. So once again, it's the key thing, because we still have questions to the implementation and the question to the person and the person on the every stage. If we are talking once again about owner, then we are talking about that fact that we have problems that supervisory boards are being created really slow. Now, this concern about the regulation was adopted recently by the Cabinet of Ministers, it has still lots of discretion. So not later than 90 days, not later than 1 month, not later than whatever. So once again, we see the discretion is clear because this is a difficult decision. A lot of things has to be analyzed, but this process can be postponed till the very last moment, till the 90th, till the 30th date. So here the appointment of the supervisory board will depend a lot on the wish of that owner to finish this procedure as soon as possible and to appoint the supervisory board. The nomination committees sometimes work with their own pool of specialists. We need to expand this principle, but for this, the owner should communicate once again with the recruiters so that recruiters work with their pools, and recruiters should clearly formulate what the owner might expect from what will be done. Important also that if to talk about the supervisory board, all these scandals, they do not really help good people to come to such competitions, even though now in energy companies we have had so many people that joined the competition. I don't know, maybe Roman can comment more about this, but here once again we're talking about who's being appointed. Sometimes we have questions about those who are selected as independent members, state members. It's an interesting title, for example, because we have independent and state representatives, and when I was working on this presentation I also wanted to write independent and dependent representatives. So here the key thing is that the matter of selection, so the state and representative should still be independent, and this person should be a professional, should be considered like this, because very often it is perceived that it is a dependent member, and in several supervisory boards we have certain questions that the state representative is dependent on political will. So it's not like from the owner what should be achieved, but when we make some political decision. But once again, yes, I'm coming to the end. I'm almost wrapping up. So once again, the challenge of 2026, in the nearest future, all state enterprises should be transformed into LTDs and so on and so forth, because the economic code is not active anymore. And why it's a challenge? Because at the same time, when we need to apply, we need to appoint lots of supervisory boards, we need to relaunch this whole organization, and it's the influence and efforts of the same people. And now I would like to give the floor to Roman. Yes, let me give the floor. I would like to say the following thing. So this presentation that we have here right now is already placed in our chat, so you can download it and you can take a look, because I see that lots of people are taking pictures. You don't necessarily have to do that. And one more thing before we move on, I would like to say that please pay attention to several things. Today we are not talking about a regulatory climate around big and other state enterprises, because the matter of competition, the various matters of various politics connected with setting tariffs and so on and so forth, it's a topic of a separate discussion, and obviously it has to be discussed already in a more specialized form. Today we really would like to get to that level of enterprises. Enterprises, to take a look how they work as normal economic agents. And now I had my 2 cents, and now I would like to give the floor to Mr. Roman Niecowicz, Dixie Group. They're dealing with energy. I would like to ask when we solve the problem with electricity, but I think that I shouldn't ask this. So, Roman, please. By the way, the matter of corporate governance is connected with it a little bit. Actually, it has not appeared because of corruption scandal famous as Mindigate. Such problems also were before. You can remember when the independent members of the supervisory board of left from Naftogaz because of political pressures, and then they appointed needed people in the part of management, let's put it like that. Similar thing happened in 2021 in the same Naftogaz. Similar situation happened in Ukrenergo in 2024. There were certain conflicts between the supervisory board and the management in Ukrenergo last year. So, let's say that investigation that was public was just a catalyst, and it showed that actually this is not only the matter of who is appointing who, but it's also the matter that the energy is a sphere where state-owned companies are in domination, either because of natural monopoly or because of that regulation that is now on the market. These people work with billions, and of course, temptation for political elites to somehow control those flows for their own needs and to use this for their own need is pretty high. And of course, it is influencing such political intervention, and it is influencing political investment programs, and these are repairments and implementation of protection programs for critical infrastructure. So I would say that all of these things can influence the pace of implementation of certain matters that might strengthen our resilience in the conditions of war. And frankly speaking, as you can see, even before this public scandal, actually the government had certain target vision, so to form supervisory boards, functional supervisory boards, so that they can select management and to change charters and internal policies in accordance to all those standards and good things that Alexandra was talking about. And actually, it all had to be bring in compliance with the law. The law was adopted on improving corporate governance, and it's time to implement this. So the scandal that was in November was just a catalyzer, and after that already the president informed about this big relaunch. There was also the order to fire 14 members of the supervisory board. Then on the 15th of December, Ministry of Economy announced the competition for certain positions. And the last event in part of regulation at the beginning of the month, a little bit simplified order of selection, but I think that it will come into force already in 2027. Now, what stage we are at right now? Certain illustration. Once again, we all know that in Energoatom we now have full-fledged supervisory board, but I would like to draw your attention to several non-obvious things, because the first problem that will appear is Naftogaz in January. It's the end of work for 4 independent members. Independent competition was announced in December, and we still do not see the results of such competition approved. So in the nearest future, there will be no quorum of the supervisory board of Naftogaz, and the responsibilities will move to the Cabinet of Ministers. The next thing that I would like to mention, it is a competition for positions of members of the supervisory board of Ukrainian distribution systems. Here, there is blocked by the court because one of the independent members is appealing his firing. Other things that are still without attention so far, it is position in the supervisory board of Naftogaz. The competition has not yet been announced for the representative of the state after they decided to say goodbye to Rostislav Shurmoy. The market operators, now there is also competition for 2 members, representatives of the state, but nevertheless we still have 3 vacant positions of independent members. So in 2 of them already do not have the responsibility there, so they were fired in December because of that, and 1 more was fired still in June previous year. because of his own wish. And
питання, чи в операторі ринку
so the question whether market operators
місяці взагалі
will have in the nearest months quorum, even if two members are selected. So then, if we do not have supervisory boards, then we see that once again, we still have half the day today. Maybe some miracle happens and they will announce certain results, and then there will be appointments. But once again, all these deadlines are connected to it on conducting competitions and selecting executive bodies. So these are either head of the management board or CEO, or as with the case of Ukrainian distribution system, two members of management. So accordingly, if there are no competitions, then either in the status of acting heads, which is the worst, or the previous management is working. Here in this chart, we do not have such companies as guaranteed buyer because it has been changed into today they are now finishing registration action, so that's why there is no competition for the supervisory board. The deadline there is the 1st of March, and also there is Kremenchuk power station. Status is not known on selecting members of the supervisory board. The same in Nizhny-Dniprovsk on the 21st of January. They should have had general meetings, general assembly. We do not have any public documents concerning the results of such meetings. And of course, there are certain questions to executive bodies of big groups as Naftogaz and a group of Ukrainian distribution systems. There also should be in branches, according to the decree of the Cabinet of Ministers, they should also form executive bodies. So we see that as of now, mostly the focus is on that human factor that Alexandra was talking about, so formation of management bodies. At the same time, there is a thing connected with the bringing the statutes and policies in compliance with legislation and best practices, because we know that, for instance, in some previous year, some statutes were changed. For instance, in Ukrenergo, some others as well, and there was this thing as qualified majority, so not independent members who should be majority in the supervisory board and they should deal with the matter of appointing management, but representatives of the state got this right to veto, so without their voice, no one can be appointed. I perceive it as a certain way of intervention or forming such conditions when some people might be appointed, and it seems to me that we need to pay attention to this matter as well. In the Cabinet of Ministers are talking about introducing changes that members of the supervisory board should not avoid responsibility defined in the law, but it seems to me that we need to talk here about the principle of the balance of interests, the principle of balance. So once again, not have political intervention. Those decisions about executive body. So one thing that I would like to talk about as well is matter of access to information. In autumn, there were certain changes adopted to the order of publication procedure with the state companies, and they got this opportunity to offer to close access to such information without any kind of justification. And for the operator of Ukrenergo, already certain decrees were made, and now they do not need to make public something, for example, as the list of expectation of the owner or strategic plan of development and reports about their performance or report about management. So once again, motivation was that these documents might have some information about infrastructural entities, facilities or their potential. Once again,
пропонуємо
we are
все-таки,
offering
змінити цей підхід,
to change this
додати
approach
додаткове обґрунтування, чому
and to
саме
add justification
ви хочете закрити доступ до цих
why
документів.
exactly the
Другий
access
момент
should be
все-таки
closed to
застосовувати
such documents.
трискладовий тест,
And the
який
second thing,
належить
to use a
законом про доступ до
three-component
публічної
test
інформації. Тобто,
that is
чи
mentioned in the law
переважає
on
шкода від
access to
закриття
public
інформації,
information. So maybe
можливої
the
шкоди від її оприлюднення?
harm from closing this information
Другий
is
момент – це
bigger than
закриття
harm from
недокументу
disclosing this
інформації. Тобто,
information.
якщо
And the second
щось
thing is
там
covering not the
для
document, but
суперсекретне,
the
будь
information.
ласка,
So if there is
витирайте це,
something
закривайте
super
доступ, але
secret,
публікуйте документ.
close it,
Знову ж таки,
but
не у
still
всіх
publish the document.
компаніях на
Once
сайтах
again,
навіть
not
можна
all
дізнатися про
companies on
склад
their
наглядової
website
ради.
even have information
Іноді
about the
доводиться
members of
йти
the
в ці
supervisory board. Sometimes
повідомлення
we
в
need to
систему
go
фондового
to
ринку, да,
the
і
system of
шукати
the fund market
спеціальну
and to
інформацію
look
про
for
те,
the
що там
information
якийсь член
that
наглядової
some
ради
member of
був
the
звільнений,
supervisory
з яких
board
підстав
was
і так далі.
fired, what were the
Тобто
reasons for
немає
this, and
навіть
so on and so
відповідних
forth. So
розділів на сайті,
there are
де
no
є
even
склад наглядової ради і
there is
біографія
no
членів,
information
хто взагалі
on
цим
the
займається.
website about with
Це
the
важлива
members of the
інформація,
supervisory
яку
board
не варто
biography of the members of the
приховувати
supervisory
від
board. It's an
суспільства.
important information. It shouldn't be
Ось.
hidden
Ну,
from the
і,
society.
зрештою,
And
ми говоримо про
actually,
те, щоб потрошку
we are
підтягувати
saying that we need
компанії державної
to
форми власності до
bring the
тих
companies
вимог звітності, які
of
стосуються
state-owned
тобто
companies to ESG
сталості,
reporting
соціальної
standards.
відповідальності
So,
корпоративного управління, і те,
sustainability,
що
corporate
стосується due
responsibility, and
diligence, тобто
social
належної
responsibility, and
перевірки
corporate
своїх
governance. And also, we need to
контрагентів.
have due diligence,
Це
so
те, що
proper assessment of their
суттєво
counteragents.
підвищить довіру
This is
кредиторів.
something that might
Так, а це дуже
significantly
важливо в нинішніх
improve
обставинах,
the
тому що
trust of creditors, and it is
такі
extremely
установи,
important
як
under our
ЄБРД,
current
Європейський
situations
інвестиційний банк,
because
ну,
such
надають кредити
institutions as
компаніям,
EBRD
яких
or European investment banks
проблеми
will
є з
not give
корпоративним
loans to
управлінням. Достатньо
companies that have
подивитися
problems with
на
corporate governance. It's
ті рішення,
enough
які
just to take
приймалися,
a look at
наприклад,
those solutions
після
that were
скандалів в
made
Укренерго. Да, після
after
цих
scandals
скандалів
in Ukrenergo.
компанія не
After
отримала
those scandals, the
кредитів. Так, зараз
companies
кредити
did
отримує
not
Нафтогаз.
achieve loans. Now
Побачимо, що буде
Naftogaz is
з цими
getting
рішеннями,
loans. We'll
якщо вони
see
ще
what
буде
will happen with such
функціонуюча наглядова рада.
decisions if they do not have functioning supervisory board.
Я тут завершу. І
Yes, and I'm
просто
going to stop here, and I will be happy to take questions if you have any. Thank you. We got several questions. Let's do it in the following way. Now I'm going to read them out, and if we have someone here on the stage, on this improvised podium, if they can answer these questions, they will. If not, then I will send this later to others for dealing with this. It's pretty long question. It's in the chat, but I will try to shorten it to small questions. So the first one is the work of the supervisory board and their work in emergencies. So how the war influences. The second moment, what principles and what decisions are made with certain while going outside of the principles of corporate governance, taking into account this emergency situation. The second point matters connected with the purchasing gas taking place in this emergency situation. And one more thing, I don't know whether we can answer this, but it consists of several questions. So this question consists of several parts. So first of all, what key decisions were made in the companies that we were talking about having 100% formed supervisory boards? And it's the first sub-question. And the second sub-question, what exact investment decisions were made in full or not full members of the supervisory board? But once again, we are referring here to those emergency conditions that Ukrainian economy is working in right now. Please. Just in a nutshell, I hope that our panelists will talk about this in more details, but actually the work in emergencies to say that we need extremely professional people in supervisory boards in peaceful times and especially in difficult times during full-scale war. We need to have their professional people who understand what has to be done and how to act. Of course, that now certain decisions should be made on a regular basis. And by the way, it's one more question to the supervisory boards, how often they meet, because I have heard that certain companies, they gather pretty rare and almost do not see each other offline. And that's a big obstacle, especially now when decisions has to be made effectively. And now I would like to give the floor to Roman. Maybe he can give a more detailed answer.
Дивіться.
Well,
Дуже часто в наших
Pretty
обставинах
often,
надзвичайних уряд приймає
in
певні рішення,
our
які
emergency
впливають на
circumstances, a government can
показники
make decisions
роботи
that might influence
конкретних
the
державних компаній.
indicators of work of
І
specific
в
state
такому разі
companies.
необхідно
And in
оперативно
this
знову
particular
уряду змінювати
situation, we
листочок
need
мить,
to
тому що
change
очевидно, що
the list of
змінюються
expectations
параметри
because
фінансового плану
obviously
компанії та
financial
тих очікувань
parameters might
щодо
change
прибутку,
and
щодо
expectations
дивідендів, які
concerning the
буде
income and dividends
сплачуватися. А
that
другий
will be
момент,
paid. And
сама
the second
наглядова рада
thing,
має
the very
відповідним чином
supervisory
коригувати
board
і там
should
реагувати,
also correlate and
говорячи про те,
react,
чи
talking about
вони як наглядовий орган
whether they, as the
здатні
supervisory
забезпечити
body,
цей
advisory body, whether
очікуваний
they can
результат. Другий момент
provide this
пов'язаний з тим,
expected
що
result.
наглядова рада
The
вона
second moment connected with the fact that the supervisory board
значні
agrees
транзакції.
significant transactions. So those transactions that go above some threshold, certain threshold, and of course that in emergencies there is a need for this, then
Позачергові засідання скликати таких наглядових рад.
we need to have such sessions with supervisory boards, and of course it's a balance
Стратегічним розвитком, який там на
between
початку
such
року
strategic
накреслено,
development
і
that was at the beginning
тими
of the year
змінами,
and
які от виникають, коли
those
прилітає
changes
чорний
that
лебідь,
might
прилітає
happen when Black Swan
балістична ракета в
is
нашому
arriving,
випадку,
or
або
ballistic
десяток.
missile in our case, or
І
thousands of
тоді,
ballistic
очевидно,
missiles.
треба
And
коригувати
then,
ті
of
показники,
course,
які
those indicators
намалювали
have to
для
be
менеджменту
adjusted, that
для конкретної компанії.
those indicators that were made for management of a specific company. Thank you, Roman. Let's consider this first part finished, and let's think that we already started talking about corporate governance. Now I will say that we have the change. I would like to invite our guests to come here, and we are going to talk with those who have been actually performing all this corporate governance for many, many years already. Yes, colleagues, please come already here.
Шановні колеги,
Dear colleagues,
я скажу по секрету, до нас приєдналася
I would like to open the secret. We have Irina with us, representatives of European Bank of Reconstruction and Development, but she will be talking about corporate governance. Please do not ask for money, do not ask for funds. We are going to talk only about a policy. Now let's talk about serious things. I know that we have on the line with us Lisa Surhausen, but considering that we all live in such military circumstances and we have certain problems, I would like to give the floor now to Mr. Yevhen Dubogris, the Deputy Minister of Development of Communities and Territories of Ukraine. So the key matter of what are you doing, what is being done from the side of the government, and how you select people so that they can actually represent the interest of the state. So please. Thank you, Igor. It's a big pleasure for me to be here because I am a former student of Igor. So that's I'm very happy that we are at the same panel with him now. And it's
Вибачте, що я тут перший, просто в мене там нарада.
Excuse me to be the first here. Sorry for being speaking the first. It's just I have a meeting and I will need to move faster. About corporate governance, if to talk about what we do, well, corporate governance is not an aim in itself. First of all, we need to understand why we do this. Like, you know, there is a phrase, so to have what, so what? And especially during the war, the answer to this question is actually absolutely different for different companies. So relatively speaking, when we are talking about Ukrposhta, it is one goal, it is one aim. When we are talking about something else, it's a second aim. So for different companies, it varies. So based on that company, that aim, we as shareholders select the structure of the governance. So how this corporate governance is going to look like, because corporate is connected only with the supervisory board in our case, but frankly speaking, it's this whole complex. The second thing, what's the composition of people, what qualifications they have, and how fast they are able to make decisions. This all, it is all case by case. If you're talking about our
порти,
assets, ports,
в майбутньому аеропорти, інші
airports in the future, and
підприємства для нас
our
особисто,
state
як
enterprises. For
міністерство,
us,
для
frankly
держави, для
speaking,
нас
for the
головне
ministry, for the
це
state,
безпека.
for us, the most important thing is
Це
safety.
на першому місці, і
So
тому
it's on the
ми,
first
коли,
place, it's on priority, so that's why
підбираємо керівників,
when we are
організовуємо
selecting
це от управління практично,
heads,
у нас
managers, when we
фокус на
organize all
те,
this
щоб
practical governance, we
була
focus
безпека, ну,
on
там,
having
морських
the
шляхів,
safety
фокус
of
на тому,
sea
щоб
routes,
рішення приймали
on
швидко, особливо
that
там
the
після
decisions are
якихось
made
там
very
прильотів.
fast,
І ми
especially
вибудовуємо
after
свою
certain
систему взаємодії з менеджментом компанії, відтак і шукаємо
certain challenge, and that's why we develop our
розрахування
cooperation
цих
with managers of the
По Укрпошті
company and
наприклад,
with taking
історія
into
інша,
account
да?
all these things. With
Там,
Ukrposhto, it's a little bit different
абсолютно
story. So
прекрасний, brilliant, я
it's
би сказав,
absolutely
топ-менеджер,
brilliant, I
генеральний
would say,
директор,
top
яким я особисто
manager,
захоплююсь,
and I
Там
am
вже
in
є
awe
дуже
of him.
професійна наглядова
They already
рада,
have very
і
professional
відтак наша
supervisory
задача,
board,
скоріше,
and
її
our task
доповнити
is
та
rather to
урізноманітнити, ніж
make
щось
it
там
more
переформатовувати.
versatile or to add something to
Ось.
it than to
Ну,
reform it. And
я до чого це веду,
what I'm
що
trying
немає
to say
уніфікованого
is
підходу.
that
Принципи
there is no
OECD, та,
unified
наше
approach.
законодавство – це таке
OECD principle,
загальне, я би
our
сказав,
legislation is a
правка, да? Це те,
general
що
framework, I would put it like that.
необхідно, це те, що
It is
треба
something that
виконувати,
is
але
extremely needed. It is something that has to be done, something that has to be performed, but it is not enough on the practice. We need to look at the company, at its needs and the needs of the state in general, economic justification. So if we just take a look at separate enterprise, yes, we need to maximize the income, the revenue. We need to do everything to have good. When it's some kind of state enterprise, then we as the state should think about those people who live there, about that fact that this company, even if it's losing certain cash flow or net income, it can use some assets to give shelters to people, to have invincibility points there. So once again, during the war, certain principles are not contradicting, but just one principles might become less important, whereas others more important. And we're trying to see what we need right now. Concerning the supervisory boards, what's the story here? Actually, somehow it happens so that the supervisory board very often by some external stakeholders, they are considered as something like that people get lots of money for small work, for not so much job. But we think that market salary should also entail market work. So it's extremely important for us that those people that we are looking for, or that are already in the supervisory board, so that they can work intensively, let's put it like this. If you ask us whether it's always possible, no, it's not always possible, but we are working with that. So for example, when I was the member of the supervisory board of the bank, we met at least once per week, and it was good with our bank without any kind of problems. So, and with big companies, the supervisory board, it's not enough to meet 12 times per year. It's not, they need to work faster. The other thing, the supervisory board is that's about communication. One of the functions is to be, let's say, this bridge, maybe even buffer between the owner, shareholder, other stakeholder, especially regulator. So that's why we are looking at it in such a way that so the supervisory board can communicate properly, can also create some value for the company. I remember that when you were sending me the question, there was this question, what difficulties you're facing with. We don't have difficulties, we have only challenges. And challenges are such that the supervisory boards, based on my experience and also heads of enterprises, sometimes they suffer because they are not the people do not communicate with them enough. And this communication, in my point point of view, it's big investment in the future of the company. Because when people see that they're being listened to and someone is conducting certain negotiations with them and their opinion is really important, then they start to work more intensively and effectively. And I have observed it in those companies that we have. So that's why my advice, my practical advice, to communicate with the supervisory board, because it's a really great investment in time and value and so on. And maybe, you know, as such kind of icebreaker at the end, Americans love doing this. So our supervisory boards are perceived as, you know, creative meetings of Les Podorviansky. Who's there? Artists, what they do? They eat pasta and they drink vodka when it's some kind of celebration. So, but it's a joke, of course. So our task is for supervisory boards to be perceived as they're perceived in big companies in Western countries. It's a serious chain. It's a chain that in strategic management has really big, is really important. And performance of the company really depends on them.
Дякую дуже за те, що мене так довго слухали. Передаю слово.
Thanks a lot for listening to me, and I'm going to give the floor further on. Thank you. Taking into account our all previous agreements, let me switch on the mic just a second. Okay, then I hope that it's going to be heard. I would like to give the floor now to the representative of the OECD, Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development. Why? Because actually this is the organization that has almost two, let's say, biblical texts. The first one is the principle of corporate governance for private companies, and the second text is principles of corporate governance for state-owned enterprises or enterprises with state participation. So it is my great pleasure now to give the floor to Ms. Talisa Zurhausen, the analytic on matters of policy, Department of State Enterprises, Directorate on Financial Matters. Talisa, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for that very nice introduction. I assume I do not have to go into much detail then on the SOE guidelines and the guidelines on corporate governance. I hope everyone can hear me properly, otherwise let me know. So in any case, thank you very much for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here today. Also very interesting to hear from the previous speakers, and I'll be fascinated to continue listening because there's a lot of information we can then include in our upcoming report, which I will mention shortly. So quick introduction on myself. My name is Talisa Zurhausen. I work in the State-Owned Enterprise Unit at the OECD. Our team serves as the secretariat to the OECD Working Party on State Ownership and Privatization Practices. And this group brings together governments from OECD and partner countries to develop international standards and exchange experiences on how the state should act as an owner. And Ukraine also takes part in these meetings very regularly. So in this role, we support countries, so including Ukraine, in strengthening SOE governance frameworks, aligning them with international good practice, and ensuring that reforms translate into real institutional change. So let me just wind back a bit. In 2021, the OECD conducted a review of the corporate governance of SOEs. What is that? An SOE review is a peer-based assessment of a country's SOE framework against the SOE guidelines. So the Bible that you just mentioned, we basically apply this framework to the SOE landscape of a country. In 2021, the review found that Ukraine had made progress, but also identified significant structural weaknesses. So be it fragmented ownership arrangements, political interference in SOE operations, weak board protections, and limited transparency at the portfolio level. This is a very short summary. It's a 300-page report. I invite you to, of course, to have a look at it for further details. However, a lot has happened since then. So since 2021, especially considering the war, Ukraine has made meaningful progress towards aligning with the SOE guidelines. And I think here, two reforms stand out. First of all, the law on improving SOE corporate governance, which strengthens supervisory board powers, clarifies fiduciary duties, and limits discretionary interference. And then secondly, the ownership policy from last year, which articulates why the state actually owns the companies, what it expects from them, and how ownership rights should be exercised. So we now have all the laws on paper. Now the implementation, of course, shall follow. So both reforms follow directly the 2021 review that we put together and is closely aligning with the guidelines. I also note that we supported the process of drafting this legislation as we tried to kind of provide direct input on the text. So today the cooperation continues with support from the US. I know you were saying they're winding their support down, unfortunately, but for now, this project was supported by the US, where we're updating the review from 2021, so to really see what has happened since then. And the report will be published in April this year. So the review looks at not only the legislative framework, all the new laws and reforms, but really how are they functioning in practice, and doing an assessment also against the revised SOE guidelines, because they were just revised last year, with more of a focus on board independence, on transparency and accountability. And there's three findings from the upcoming review. Again, it's a large document, which I'm then happy to share with you in April. But first of all, legal reform has moved faster than implementation. We've seen that with some of the cases you mentioned, with some of the SOEs in their boards. Ukraine has adopted strong laws and policies, but institutional capacity, of course, also because of the war, and enforcement mechanisms are still uneven across the SOE portfolio. Secondly, supervisory boards remain a critical pressure point. So although formal board mandates have been strengthened, in practice, boards can still face uncertainty around appointment processes, voting rules, and protection from ad hoc interventions. So this can weaken their ability to act independently and strategically, which is technically enshrined in law, but again, practice, and also because of martial law, exceptions often occur. Thirdly, portfolio-wide transparency remains incomplete, so there's no full aggregate report yet. I note, again, it's because of martial law and so on, but still some exceptions could be lifted. Disclosure practices vary significantly across SOEs, limiting the state's ability to fully assess fiscal risks, public service obligations, and overall performance. So that's why we from the OECD recommend, again, based on the SOE guidelines, based on what the Working Party says, to shift from reform design to reform discipline. So this includes consistent applications of rules on board appointments, decision-making, and dismissal, ensuring that governance safeguards operate predictably in practice. Second, to further strengthen and coordinate the ownership function. So we noted this already in 2021. It's still the case that there's fragmented ownership. So having clear accountability, professional ownership capacity, and consistent guidance for SOEs is essential so that the ownership policy actually turns into an operational tool and not just a declaratory document. And thirdly, to restore and institutionalize transparency at the portfolio level. This means regular publication of audited financial statements, aggregate SOE reporting, and clearer accounting of public service obligations. So these are all pillars of the SOE guidelines. So to conclude, Ukraine has taken important steps towards aligning its SOE framework with the international standards. The challenge ahead is to not adopt more rules, but making the existing ones credible, predictable, and enforceable, especially in relation to the boards, to ownership practices, and transparency. The OECD, of course, remains fully committed to supporting Ukraine in this process. And I would like to warmly invite all of you to the launch of the new report taking place in April, where we will present the full assessment and recommendations. Thank you very much.
Дякую, пані Таліса, і я хотів би ще раз подякувати організації.
Thanks a lot to Lisa, and I would like to express my gratitude to OECD once again for setting certain parameters for us within which we develop our legislation. It's extremely important, and also we already can say with this big pride that for several years we have been cooperating with OECD. I mean, in our Institute of Economic Research, and these monitoring documents are extremely interesting because they give the opportunity to look at ourselves from various sides, because it's extremely important because we cannot assess each other in the same way. So now let's move on. We have heard Mr. Ivan Dubogres, we have heard the general message from the OECD, and now I would like to give the floor to Mr. Artem Shevalov, the Deputy Head of the Supervisory Board of the Privatbank Commercial Bank. He's a representative of the same state we are all living in this structure in particular. We remember the story that was connected with saving one of important banks of Ukrainian system and banking system, and of course without this bank we would not be able to live in the same financial conditions. So the question is very simple. I think that Artem already understood. Everyone is interested what the state is doing, and from your point of view, what should be done for the supervisory board in such difficult conditions to remain an important driver, I would say, of providing effective activity for commercial structure. Excuse me for such a long formal phrase. Thank you, Igor.
Цікаве питання, коротеньке.
It's an interesting question, a very short one. You know, probably I will start from that fact that colleagues have just mentioned the previous panel. It was really great statement or remark that there are independent and other as it was such dependent members. So that's the thing, that really good formed supervisory board, even if to take a look at OECD principles, it's a professionalism of all members of the supervisory board, and the representation of the state is a pretty relative condition, because the basic principle for all members of the supervisory board to act in the interest of organization first and foremost. So they do not perform in the interest of one specific stakeholder. Why it is important here? Because, well, if to simplify it significantly, then the change of the government should not automatically lead to the change of the members of the supervisory board, whether the independent or representatives of the state. Why? Because basic principles of functioning of the company should remain stable. In very primitive words, the example of Privatbank. So when Privatbank was nationalized, and as a result of one of the biggest case of frauds conducted by previous owners, it's still the biggest case of fraud cases of previous owners, regardless of who the president of Ukraine. So the bank was nationalized in the interest of Ukrainian people, because, well, at the end, the stakeholders of the bank are it's Ukraine and all taxpayers in Ukraine. And further management of this asset should be conducted taking into account the interest of that enterprise and by proxy the interest of Ukrainian taxpayers. And this interest, this principle is the same regardless of who's going to head it. So actually a lot has been mentioned about the functioning of the supervisory boards, and what I'm trying to say here is that basic principles should be adhered to. There is a problem, and in a way I just would like to mention here, the colleague mentioned about the list of expectations, letters of expectations, or policies of ownership. Sometimes even supervisory board maybe should become this last bastion that can protect the asset from unhealthy initiatives from the highest level. Because sometimes political relevance can win over economic common sense. And in this situation, the supervisory board is this last bastion, last fortress that should protect the asset in the interest of wider range of stakeholders.
На щастя, поки що ми таких прецедентів не бачили, да, тобто
Happily, we haven't seen such precedents before, so we did not have any significant changes in policies, but theoretically it could have happened.
в історії Приватбанку,
For example, in the history of PrivatBank several years ago, there were times when certain stakeholders asked informally the supervisory board, well, really, is Kolomoisky really that bad? Maybe not everything is so clear. Well, it's now already the phrase not everything is so clear sounds differently, but there were other times. So actually here the principal position of the supervisory board is extremely critical. Once again, it's bringing us, and Johan was talking about this, to this matter of the quality of selecting of the members of the supervisory board. It's about dependent and, not dependent, it's representatives of the state and independent members of the supervisory board. And in legislation, by the way, we have representatives of the state and independent members.
До речі, стороння ремарка, яка
By the way, just remark, maybe someone will not like it. Dependency is a really interesting concept, and we were talking a lot, in particular with our colleagues from the EBRD, that even among independent members of the supervisory board, one of the biggest threats is the appearance of dependency. And the matter of remuneration, and especially in our biggest companies, where we have set pretty good level of remuneration for independent members, can potentially cause a conflict of interest. So when a member of the supervisory board is too dependent from the income that they receive for working in the supervisory board, it's also not very good thing, and it's not very healthy. And OECD is talking about this. Yes, it's a different form of dependency. OECD actually has certain approaches concerning that fact that remuneration to the members of the supervisory board anywhere, not only in Ukraine, cannot be its main source of income, because then it already creates certain institutional linkage and can influence the quality of managing decisions, or even create such dynamics when a member of the supervisory board, well, in its interest, will to agree with some decisions of the stakeholder, hoping that it will continue the contract in the supervisory board. Once again, here we are talking about such terrible scenarios, but actually it can create certain pressure. I would like to focus maybe on practical matters as well. The presence and involvement. There are lots of supervisory boards in Europe, and supervisory boards meet once per quarter, and it's considered okay. We live in absolutely different environment. I absolutely agree here that supervisory boards in Ukrainian reality, especially in the biggest companies, supervisory boards should be really engaged. Even more so, I believe that regardless of all risks, it's extremely important for the biggest number of the members of the supervisory board to visit Ukraine regularly. And here we are not talking about some kind of political statements, but about objective reality. If you do not communicate with your management, if you do not have the opportunity to see how your assets function, so the assets that you care about, then your decisions stop being connected to reality, especially in conditions of war. It is extremely critical. Just excuse me, but just even to look in the eyes of your colleagues that are here 24/7. We need to find this happy medium, and I remember the supervisory board of PrivatBank from 2020 when the COVID started, and we spent 20-30 hours per week during calls, and that's a different think it's micromanagement, and it's not good for the responsibility of the management, for the head of the board and the management board, because when they see that the supervisory board is so over-engaged, over-involved, then, well, okay, we'll just earn money and just sit there and you do whatever you want to do. So that's all about balance. And the last remark, once again, to support what Yevhen has mentioned, it's relations with the stakeholder, and that's about the representative of the state and independent members of the supervisory board. The quality oversight from the side of the stakeholder, not political one, is an important tool. Sometimes it can be even more important than quality policies of ownership or those letters of expectations. You can hear me now? Yes, okay, thank you. So actually, from your speech, I really like the statement that supervisory board should be the last fortress from discretion, some kind of skyfall. So it seems to me that it's this statement that should be more spread and implemented in our life. But once again, this is something that we can talk about later. We talked a lot today about the principles. We talked a lot about legislation. The representative of OECD has mentioned that even with maybe with a little delay, but if retrospectively, we had a certain legislation base developed in the corporate governance. And now when we have heard all of this, I would like to give the floor to Alexei Movchan, People Deputy, the Deputy Head of Committee on Economic Development Matters, and I would like to ask such forward-looking questions. So what else, from your point of view and from based on what you have heard today, requires, well, I would not say urgent, but let's say
Я обов'язково візьму мікрофон, а то ви скажете, що я щось там...
Yes, I will definitely take the microphone because you will say that I said something to Alexei in secret. So what requires primary regulation? Taking into account that the legislation base is being formed, and it is good when it is not changing, but it cannot be formed once and forever. Thank you. Thanks a lot. I'm a deputy head of economic committee, and I was the leader of this reform on corporate governance. That was draft law together with big expert support from the EBRD in 2024. We voted for it. And we had been working on this since 2021, and now after 2 years, full years from that moment, I can say there were lots of scandals, and there was some kind of hope. Really, after its adoption, then well, we need to wait a little bit more, and we will have an ownership policy, and members of the supervisory board will be appointed. And well, I do not like it, frankly speaking. So the law is good. Really, and the OECD is absolutely right. Everything is in compliance. I even looked at their new review, and everywhere there, well, they say that maybe you need to introduce minor changes. That you don't need to have some kind of mega reforms as we did earlier. But even OECD says that everything is okay, have centralized function of management, and some other things have a triage, and well, it's also something not very complicated. It's all this performatory function and centralized functions. And even if the law, if I write that there should be a centralized function, then to implement it is much more difficult than to write it in the law. So this is the main thing we are facing with. The government does not understand how to work with this animal called corporate governance. So all ministries see it differently. It's a very interesting idea, the Ministry of Development of Territories and Communities, but what is supervisory board? Ministry of Economy has its own vision. Things got that the day before yesterday, they already appointed members of the supervisory board of Energoatom. Is probably the single positive news in the sphere. Well,
вони тепер зможуть призначати хоча б
Now they will be able to
постійно,
appoint at least
і там
constant
будуть
management, and
представники
even
держави.
those representatives
Мені
of the
здається, що
state, it
вони
seems to me
політичні, так, це не
that they are
best practice,
politically
але,
engaged. Yes, it's not best
вони
practice,
плюс-мінус,
but they are more or less
розуміють, що як працює,
understand, they more or less understand how it's working. Someone from profile ministry, someone has experience, someone from the Ministry of Economy that is performing the function of this management from the governance from the state. So actually it's okay somehow. But in other cases, no one has approached this exercise correctly, and it seems to me that some time should pass. It's, you know, when you try to get driving license, at first you get this driving license, and then you learn how to actually drive, because at first you visited courses to get this to get the driving license, and then you practice and feel more comfortable. The same is with corporate governance and with the government. So what is the profile of the supervisory board? What people should be there? So you are saying that it is important for them to be professionals. But why do you need Serhiy Leshchenko in the supervisory board of Ukrzaliznytsia? Well, really, it's not.
Ну, дивіться, тобто зрозуміло, що це хтось завжди.
So it's clear that it's someone, always. Someone is to blame. Ministry of Economy.
Дивіться, тобто це,
So,
дивіться, крайнього, ми крайнього ніколи
we
не
will
знаходимо.
always, we never find a scapegoat. Ministry of Economy says that they are not responsible for Energoatom and all the decisions of the Cabinet of Ministers, and the Ministry of Infrastructure says for Ukrzaliznytsia, and so on and so forth. So it's still a matter of requirements. So if you want, as policy, as a leader in the sphere, you want to have order there, and you have one key company, and there are certain tasks to questions to its management, to its leadership, then the supervisory board is the first step. So there should be some kind of letter. If the state approves, so there should be a letter, and but we are not talking about this, but we are talking about OECD principles. And here we have representatives of embassies and international organizations, and we are saying that yes, we are with principles, but we still have all of this going on. And the same was done by Halushchenko, who was saying that I'm not responsible for this. It's someone, some cabinet of ministers is responsible for Energoatom. But it was he really was good at organizing what he wanted to have. So of course something has to be changed, but not the law on corporate governance, because even OECD mentioned that it's okay. Yes, there are certain gaps, but still, it seems to me that we need to change this understanding of people that make decisions about what is a supervisory board, what's their functionality. Each ministry has its own point of view. It shouldn't be like that. Selection of people should be more or less standardized. So let's say it cannot be like this. So one people select leaders of the sector, representative of the state, and others have DJs. So some unified policy should be there. Maybe the state will come to it. I am also very sad about some other things, because some people say that we need to appoint members very fast. Others say that it takes time. Government sometimes is changing. So when this Mindich Gate took place, they changed the certain range of sub-laws. It's absolutely against the law and the logic mentioned in the law. So this, you know, we need to eat still some cacti to get how it should be, the same as in banking sector. The only thing that I would like to say that in banking sector we have one advantage in comparison with non-banking for corporate governance. It is national bank and its normatives and its rough regulation, strict regulation. So if we say take Ukrzaliznytsia, for example, then you can be amazing corporate director, but it's a company in really difficult conditions, or the same Energoatom. So they do not have such normatives. And banks, if
цей
Then can be just sent
банкобойню, да, фонд гарантування. От,
to
і все. Тобто, і тому
state property fund
мені здається,
or
що в
fund
банках
of
простіше,
guarantees.
але при
And
цьому
it seems to me that it's stricter in banks, but at the same time simpler because they have very strict regulator. And in other cases, regulators, they have their own opinion. That's why we have this chaos. So maybe I would like to have single regulator for all state companies as a national bank for banks that will take a look not only on corporate governance, but also on other indicators as capital and risks, so that they can manage risks. Because even half of even the biggest companies have very bad situation with debts, and people are appointed
Тобто це виклик.
corporate directors there. So it's a challenge. Thank you.
Sorry, я ні на кого не хочу там
Sorry, I do not want to offend anyone.
Так, слово для репліки надається пану
Yes,
Дубогризу.
and now
Будь
I'd
ласка.
like to give the floor to Mr. Dubogris.
Да, пане Олексію,
Thank
дивіться,
you,
от
Олексій.
перша
You
реакція,
see,
яка була,
The
нас
first my
атакують,
reaction
прийшов, хто
was
ви такий,
we
да
are
ви що не
being
шарите,
attacked.
це
Who are
неправильно.
you? We do not understand
Правильно,
anything.
мені
This,
здається,
but this is
правильно
not right.
кажете.
It seems to me
Нам важко
that you are
взаємодіяти
absolutely correct in
компаніями,
saying
бо
that it's difficult
всі
for us with some
навколо
companies
вважають, що
because
це ми,
everyone around
а
us
ми
believe
навіть
that
не є
it's
власниками. Ми до
us and we are
залізниці,
not even
до компанії,
owners.
до
We
галузі, не до політик.
to
Маємо десь таке
Укрзалізниця,
приблизно
we
відношення
have
до
the
Deutsche
same
Post,
relation
так?
as to
Тобто в нас
Deutsche
теж є
Post.
пошта,
So
да,
we
Deutsche Post
also
інша.
have
Але
Post
насправді, да,
and
це ремарка абсолютно
office
слушна,
and that's it.
тому
But this
що,
remark
а чи
is
зробили
absolutely
ми
relevant
все, щоб
because
таких
whether
цифр не
it's a
було?
question whether we
Ну, я
have
не
done
знаю, я
everything
не
not
можу
to
сказати, що
have
я
this,
зробив
and
все,
I
що
cannot
міг,
say
да,
that I have
тому
done
дякую
absolutely
за
everything that I
зауваження.
could. So
Ми
thank you
точно,
for this
ми
remark. We
ну,
will
це теж, мені здається, одна
Well,
з складових
it's
корпоративного
one
управління і політик
of
галузі,
the
да,
components of corporate
реагувати
governance and
на
policies
такі
to
речі і
react
щось
on
робити.
such
Дякую.
things and to do something.
Репліка
Thank
на
you.
репліку, будь ласка.
Ви полісімейкер в галузі і
You're a policymaker in this industry and a political top in this part. No one perceives that someone is with a cabinet minister, someone with something else. All perceive you here as well as Energoatom is perceived with Ministry of Energy because they are forming policies for them. And that's why it's important that if you want to have better results, it's important to the key player to be with quality management. And I think that your word should be taken into account. By the way, in nomination committee, they should be present because I know
Енергоатомом, Міненерго там.
that in Energoatom, Minenergo,
Да.
take something, right?
Да, Артем одразу
Okay,
показав
thank you. Artem
представника
immediately showed the representative of the European Bank.
Да. Дуже дякую,
Okay.
пане Артеме, да, за те, що знайшли
Thank you,
можливість.
Artem. Thank you for finding the
І
opportunity to stay
були
here with us today
безпосередньо взяти участь у
and
обговоренні.
to participate in the discussion. Now we already had the circle. Now let's get outside the corporate governance and people working in it, and let's give the floor to independent experts. And it is my great pleasure to give the floor to Ms. Olga Kosharna, co-founder of NGO Anti-Crisis Expert Nuclear Center of Ukraine. She's been dealing a lot with atomic energy matters, and let's listen to this point of view from a different side. So please, Olga, the floor is yours. Well, usually they call me Baba Yaga, a witch, on public, so I'm always against everything, but still I would like to start from something positive. So the thing is that it was the first time when the competition was announced to select representatives from the state. Concerning even Energoatom, 106 people participated. And all in all, 3 public officials were appointed that will be working without salaries of the member of the supervisory board, that have power, that have responsibilities more than it's needed. I was a public official, just the head of the department, but I did not have time at all. And these people are the head of a recovery agency, Sukhumlin, the deputy head of the Ministry of Economy and Agrarian Policy, and so on and so forth. So I think that this unification of all these ministries was a mistake. And the third, the state secretary, new person for me. I have already had 10 ministries of energies during my life, but it's a state secretary that is working now together with Shmyhal. And as far as I understand, he has come from the Ministry of Defense. And I cannot imagine how one can work as a full member of the supervisory board of such a difficult enterprise and technological and legal and economic as Energoatom. But that fact that the government made this decision, I think it's a colossal progress. So I do hope that Lashchenko, Milovanov, that was in the previous composition of the supervisory board, that we will not have them here. Concerning the supervisory board in general of Energoatom, Energoatom put lots of effort, colossal efforts, not to create not to have the supervisory board, and this with the pressure, it was formed somehow with zero result. About this, so I support here my colleague. He was saying that the law is good, but the implementation of this law and sub-laws that were created in chaos after Mindich scandal, it is something not right. For example, I know that there was this competition on independent members. The documents can be submitted until the 3rd of December, and the 3rd of December we have new regulation. So whatever, I don't know what's going on there. So these four independent members, they are very professional. And I support colleagues that say that we need to have professional people. They're all great people, but Patrick Fragman, representative Easterhouse, he was selected with violating the procedure because in the conditions we have that the candidate should not have any kind of relations with Energoatom for the last year. Patrick Fragman quit in 2025, and then for several months he was a consultant. And I believe that it is a kind of machination that took place there. Concerning 3 representatives from the state, I know people that are highly professional, that they're patriots, they were in alignment with all the requirements, but without state positions. Why the state decided that they for state interest? More professional people that have free time to deal only with such matters. So what do I want to add here? So this situation of Mindich Gate, this chaos, all those public statements, that we create some this, we create that. So when the supervisory board was dismissed, this dismissal was with violations of the law. In particular, colleagues who mentioned about this. So dismissal is possible after the report on the general meetings. That's why Andrei Kostreza appealed to the court as the president of Energy Club and the independent member of Ukrainian Distribution Network. It's a difficult company. I do monitor all of this because we are talking about the scandal of Mindich and Kharkiv-Oblenergo. It's one of the components of Ukrainian Distribution Network. But the main message here is that we have to stick to the laws and norms of the laws and government first and foremost, and not to do, I don't know how to put it in a correct words, but you understand what I mean. So, and concerning Energoatom, let me remind you that Energoatom right now with generation 11 gigawatt it has now 70% of electricity. So my opinion is the following. It's a monopolist on the market. Before it was the TAC and Energoatom, now only this one. And in my personal opinion, the central office should be liquidated as a source of corruption generally. And each station should become a separate subject entity of market of electricity and has separate supervisory boards. This is my point of view. Then there will be competition. Then there will be the incentive to decrease and optimize
витрати, ці операційні витрати,
these
і таке
operational
інше. Це
expenses,
єдиний шлях наших.
it is the only way in our conditions. Thank you for
Дуже
attention.
дякую, пані Ольга. Да, я
Thank
думаю,
you,
що
Olga.
дійсно ця тема безкінечна.
And I believe really
Питання
that this topic is
традиційно на
never
таких
ending.
заходах,
I see that
першу частину
traditionally
послухали,
such
поговорили,
events that we
потім
listen the
з'являється
first
друге
part, we
дихання,
talk, and
хочеться
then
ще
we have
поговорити. Я
the
хотів би, щоб
second,
ми повернулися
now
зараз
the
до одного
second
питання,
wings,
яке у нас
set of wings
є
appear, and we
із
still
залу,
want
да,
to
і
talk
потім
more. But
я
I would
передам
like to
там
get back to
слово
one of the
пані
questions that we have from
Ірині,
the audience, and then I
представнику
will give the
Європейського
floor to
банку
Irina,
реконструкції та
representatives of
розвитку,
the
для того, щоб вона
EBRD,
підсумувала, що вона
so
почула,
that she can sum
що їй
up
не
everything
вдало,
that
що їй
she
сподобалось. Ну,
has
це
heard,
далі,
what
ваші
what frightened her and what she
підготуватися.
liked.
Якщо
So you
говорити
have one more
серйозно,
minute to get ready.
питання таке,
Now,
мені
if to talk
здається, воно
seriously,
таке,
the
як
question
кажуть,
is the
дуже
following, and
слушне.
it seems to me that
Вітаю.
it's
Як ви дивитесь
very
на те, щоб пов'язати
timely.
винагороду
Hello, how do
з
you
конкретними
what do you
досягненнями,
think
які
about
має
connecting
встановити
remuneration with certain
відносно
achievements that
об'єкту?
should be
Це
set
мене нагадує
from the
відому,
owner
так мовити, революцію так званих
concerning
KPI,
the
які були
object? It
принесені різними, так мовити, гілками
reminds me
влади.
about
І тепер ми
KPIs,
повертаємося
this
знову
revolution
до
of
KPI,
KPIs, and
але
now
вже, так
we are
сказати,
getting
до
back to those
прив'язки до
KPIs, but
винагороди.
already with
Ми, нам
this
пощастило, Євген.
remuneration
Виконавча влада,
connection. So we are happy here.
Мовчан,
Yevhen,
да,
executive
законодавча влада.
government, Movchan,
будемо
legislative power. How are we going to pay?
Кому? Мені як як
Значить, питання таке було. Як ви дивитесь
So
на
the
те, щоб
question was the
пов'язати
following.
винагороду з
What do you
конкретними
think about
досягненнями,
linking the
які має
remuneration
встановити
with
власник
achievements
відносно
that should be
об'єкта
set by the
управління?
owner concerning the
Я
object?
думаю, що дивіться, перше,
Concerning
я
the
думаю, що
concerning
має
the
бути
entity.
якась
So first and
відповідальність
foremost, I think that there
ради.
should be some kind of responsibility of the members of the supervisory board.
Дивіться, це як мінімум,
So
да, бо у
it's
нас
at
є
least
цей
because
інструмент, по-моєму, обнулився
this
з цим
tool
Mindgate. От,
does
але
not work now
я знаю,
after
що є
Mindgate Gate,
юрисдикції, де є
but
навіть
there are some
кримінальна
jurisdictions when there is
От,
even
тобто
criminal
там не
responsibilities.
усюди, але за
So
окремі
not
об'єкти, бо,
everywhere, but for certain entities,
ну,
because
іноді це, знаєте, бездіяльність, вона
Sometimes
може коштувати ще
absence
гірше,
of some
ніж,
certain actions can be
злочинна
worse
діяльність якась, да?
than a
От.
criminal
Це
activity.
перше. Друге,
That's the first thing.
не завжди
The
вони мають
second
бути
thing,
великі
not
ці
always
зарплати. Тобто вони точно
these
мають
salaries
бути
should be
якимись
high. They
ринковими,
definitely
адекватними,
should
але
be
також є юрисдикції, в
market
тому числі в
and
Європейському
adequate, but
Союзі,
there are also
там, де,
jurisdictions in the
умовно,
European
це
Union as
державна
well,
компанія,
when
яка
it's
разів
some kind of
40 більше, ніж
state-owned
наша
companies
найбільша
that is
державна
4
компанія,
times
да, і
bigger than
там
our biggest
плюс-мінус ті самі
state-owned
зарплати,
company, and they have
як у
more or less
нас.
the same
Да,
salaries
тобто,
as we do.
але
But
компанія більша, за обороти більше.
company is
Тобто, підходи
bigger.
абсолютно різні будуть, але
So
вони мають
approaches
бути
might be very
адекватні. І оце,
different,
знаєте,
but
бо
it should
у
be
нас дуже багато
adequate.
критики в сторону
Because we have
корпоративного
lots of
саме через зарплати.
criticism
Ну, і вибачте,
concerning
Лещенко.
corporate governance because
Ну,
of
всі кажуть, а
Leshchenko
чого
and
так?
salary.
І-
So
але ж це
everyone
не
is saying
маркер
why it's like this, but
корпоуправління в
it's not a
Україні,
marker
правда?
of corporate
Типу,
governance in Ukraine,
один
right?
член наглядової ради в УЗ.
One
Але
member of
всі
the supervisory
сприймають це
board,
через нього.
but
Тому,
everyone
якби,
perceives
оце
it through
цим
him.
треба
So
управляти,
that's
це
why
репутаційна
it
штука.
should be managed. It's a reputational thing. Thank you, Johan, please.
Корпоративне управління, ну це що? Це ж весь
So you see,
комплекс, да,
corporate
і
governance, it's this whole
керівники,
complex, and these
топ-менеджери,
are
тобто
heads and
виконавчий
top
орган,
managers and executive
цим,
body.
словами цього закону, да, це теж, і от якраз ці люди, вони
And these
да,
people
по державних підприємствах,
are,
там зарплати
yes, in
прив'язані до
state-owned
конкретних
enterprise,
KPI,
yes,
до фінансових
salaries
показників, до
are
виробничих
connected
показників,
to
тут же йшла
CP,
мова про те,
to
очікування
KPIs.
власників,
We
воно там
already mentioned
фіксується
letters
в
of
умовах,
expectations,
їхніх
and
планах.
it is mentioned in financial
Наглядовим
plans and
радам,
in
чесно, я не
conditions.
пам'ятаю, щоб таке було.
About supervisory boards, I
Наглядова
don't
рада,
remember
розумієте,
anything
вона,
like that. But
ну,
supervisory
ми
board,
можемо
you see,
на неї
we
вішати якісь
cannot
операційні складові.
hang
тому
some
що
operational
це все взаємопов'язано,
components
але
here
все-таки
because
за
it's all
операційні
interconnected,
показники
interrelated.
відповідальність несе і
But
має нести
responsibility should be for
топ-менеджмент.
operational
Ну, я однозначно
indicators from
вірю
top
собі в
management.
теорії, можливо,
In
Олексій
the supervisory
скаже,
board,
що
well,
це
I'm not so strong in theory. Maybe Alexei can say that it's
доцільно це
whether it's
мати
relevant
змішану
to
систему
have this at
нагороди.
all,
Ну,
this
мені
mixed
здається,
system of
ідея
remuneration,
є, але
because
я не
it
настільки
seems to me
володію
yes and
цією
no, but I am
темою, щоб
not
однозначно
as
казати.
good
За керівництво точно так,
in this
за
topic as
і це
to
є.
talk
За
about
наглядову
this.
раду.
I'm not as good at it.
Знову ж таки,
Well, about
наглядова
supervisory
рада в
board,
кожному
once again,
підприємстві.
why do we
Мені
need
здається, це
supervisory board in each enterprise? It seems to me that it's
Дякую.
case by
Так,
case.
приймається дана
Thank
точка
you.
зору. В принципі, ми
Accepted.
багато
This point of view is
питань, які ви
accepted. We
залишаємо без
actually,
відповіді, але ми просто показали черговим, так мовити, значить,
of course, we
нашим
still
виборам
showed with our selection of special topic that it's really complicated topic, and we do have here the question of independence. And when we talk about the regulator and we compare it with the national bank, then it seems to me that it's not exactly right to do so. Why? Because the national bank, we know how it is informed, and it is absolutely independent. And 10-15 years, we really had this fight for it to really be independent, not to give loans to some kind of brick factories and so on and so forth. We had all of this, and now when we create this regulator, obviously we need to think how it's going to be included to the system of state governance, because we have cabinet of ministers. We have not simple relations between the cabinet of ministers and parliaments, because let's talk directly about this. So really, we need to pay attention to all of this. But the only thing that I would like to mention before giving the floor to Irina, obviously there should be responsibility, but at the same time there should be certain independence and certain autonomy, if you want, of the members of the supervisory board, regardless of who they represent. Because really, it's true that very often it is perceived as some kind of controller, and sometimes he is a controller. Let's put it like that. But on the other side, there are certain plans. I understand that the government has lots of problems that those problems have to be solved today, but not always. They have to be in operational activities of corporate. I understand that taking into account our reality, it might sound a little strange, but it's still a big problem. So once again, summing up this part before giving the floor to Irina, I see that we have more or less the same legislation, even though if we're talking about legislation, we have the key problem. We have legislation and we have sub-laws. It's a problem in Ukraine that we still cannot figure out. The second question is institutional capacity. In this case, it's institutional capacity of decision makers and also those that are directed to work in good sense of this word, and the matter of responsibility. So with the matter of responsibility, not everything is so clear, because in our work, very often good people do not want to do something different, because declarations are needed, some other things are required here, and politically you can get hit very fast, and regardless whether you did this or not. This is also our reality, and we have it here. And in this case, I support those people that work in government, in parliament, and in other structures, because actually we understand everything. But let's consider that I just saved some time on wrapping up. So Irina, please. Well, it's not a good role to finish such talks, but excuse me, I will start in Ukrainian, but on professional topics, I will move into English. So excuse me for that, because with Alexei we were working, and I think that we already have done a lot. Our way is so big already from what we started and when we are at right now.
You know what I would like to say? That all aspects discussed today, they would require probably a week of the discussion. These are huge topics. But I can tell you that, because since we started with Alexei 2021, or even 20, it was like a big theme at that time, and we even didn't know how we will manage and how we will be able to succeed. And there's a lot of work. The law, yes, we have the law. Is it perfect? Come on, not perfect, but we didn't stop, yeah? We continue discussions and we will work. And through implementation of all these legislation, we spotted actually a lot of weaknesses, which we are going to address. And actually the law also was a little bit on compromise. In which sense? Because we realized that not everything can be stipulated by the law. So what it means that's why many areas we left deliberately to be regulated by bylaws, yeah? We discuss it and we've done it. And still there is a long way to go. But I would agree, which my colleague partner OECD said, yes, progress has been made. We cannot deny. And corporate governance, it's such a difficult area, and it's a culture which can be built over years. We cannot just, law, regulation, capacity, and done. No, it's path, which we go together. And EBRD, yes, we involved almost in each area, in legislation, in bylaws, in regulation, these resolutions which you reported, yeah, Maria, yes, we've been working on that probably, frankly speaking, almost a year. And we are glad that it has been achieved. again, perfect, not perfect, but give us a good framework to work. And except criticism about Energatom, it also was not an easy situation, to resolve it. And for me, I see corporate governance and what actually happened, it's like an indicator of what is happening in the society, in the political life, in economic life. It shows, kind of reveals what the issues are. And you cannot resolve all of them just through corporate governance. But it indicates where actually the weaknesses, where these difficult spots which needs to be addressed. And every step is a little bit a compromise, and partially because the whole situation is very difficult to resolve. And I think Energatom, I don't see it's like a final stage. Yeah, it's just the beginning of building a proper corporate governance system. We have big hopes because independent actually quite. You agree that they were quite high level. Representing high level in corporate governance and in nuclear expertise. So we hope that there will be a good lead, and actually for the first time we have 2 women actually on the board. I think it's a special achievement. So I hope there will be a good result. So about our involvement, because I'm just maybe a little bit messy, sorry, because we're involved in so many aspects. Yes, we do finance because they would discuss, yes, EBRD is still financing the companies, even the corporate governance is not perfect, but it's critical for the economy to support the livelihood and economy in the country. So it's building gradually, as I say, step by step, and we will continue financing and supporting these companies with the attached transition to improving and building stronger corporate governance. And the nomination committee, is it perfect? Again, not a perfect institution. There were many already discussions about that. And how we can improve and how to make sure that voice of the observers is heard. And we have really more collaboration than confrontation, during our discussion and selection. We do support recruiters, we discuss, and now we are working already on setting up board profile, which we didn't have before. So it should be, we're looking at the entire board to ensure that there is a proper skill mix. So there are so many areas which we can, I think, I see it, Igor, probably just at the beginning of our discussion, because we need more deeper discussion. Remuneration, it's a separate big thing. And by the way, there is ongoing study on remuneration, which will be like create a base for the further discussion and improving this area. So we are actually financing and conducting there is model of charters, because charters, we are helping design the model of charters for state-owned enterprises. There is a lot of going on aspects, which still the results to be seen, to be discussed, but we don't lose our hope. I hope we are on the right path. Even with all, as you said, deficiencies in Energatom. You didn't mention Naftogaz is coming next. Ukrposhta, we're working hard with Yevgen, and hopefully we will succeed, because we have really good intention and objectives. So I would like to finish in a good note, because, yes, a lot of areas to improve. But we are moving in the right direction, and you have here people heavily involved in all these aspects, and I think these joint efforts. This is the key. We do joint efforts among international stakeholders, which is what help us actually to make progress. So I think we are moving in the right direction. This is all what I can say. Thank you.
You can hear me now. Thanks a lot. Now let's do the following thing. If you have any questions in the audience, let's take them, and then our colleagues will already in their final words summarize something. Let's start. Maria, please.
Дуже дякую. Марія Рибко, Центр економічної стратегії.
Thanks a lot, Maria, Center of Economic Strategy. I actually also want to finish this event with positive note. I don't know whether my question will finish this event or not, but I would like to discuss this. So this situation with Energoatom, it's just right here in front of us. So we have the situation with a system of corporate governance in Ukraine. And that's why happened what has happened, and we all know what has happened with the supervisory board. But where do we want to get to? It's like one of the colleagues of Johan says that in my ideal world, so in our ideal world, how should each stage look like where the supervisory board didn't work to prevent corruption and all that terrible situation that happened, but how it should work on each of the stages in ideal world, an ideal case scenario, according to best practices or what we want to achieve. Thank you. Thank you. And one more question. Immediately, we are collecting all the questions and then we will sum it up. Hello, Yulia Politaeva, the advisor of Vice Prime Minister on recovery. I'm a little bit relevant to the topic that we're discussing right now, and I have the question to Alexei and Darina. You mentioned the work on the law on corporate reform starting from 2021. If this law was developed already after full-scale invasion, or in those conditions when we already knew that it would take place, whether your approach would be difficult. So do you see that something could have helped us, something that we do not have now, if it's possible to fantasize on this topic a little bit? Yes, and I have promised. Okay, then we have heard the questions. Who's ready to answer what? Please comment and wrap up. Johan, please, let's start from you. So it seems to me that the advisor of the Prime Minister can ask me in a different situation as well. So, Maria, ideal world is a world without Russia. It's when we live without shellings, without being constantly attacked, and we can develop everything according to principles and templates, how it is all around the world. Because in the world, it works, it's proved effectiveness. There is no ideal world. So I can only repeat that everything depends on the company. So there is no universal solution that it has to be done like this and you'll be happy. No, I always have analogy with football, you know. So I visited the football pitch and saw Energy football team. And when you were looking at this, you thought that football is something really bad. But then you were watching Barcelona playing and you understood that football is a really cool game. So the same as here, there is no universal approach. Somewhere it works, somewhere it does not work. So in the ideal world, in the supervisory board, in management board, among stakeholders, we have professional people, dedicated people that really majority of their working time dedicate to maximizing value of that company. But let's be frank, there is no ideal world. We have what we have. Thank you. I personally think the next stage is to take away emergency regulation. We have 3 various regulations that do not coincide with these on practice. So it's Energoatom, Укрзалізниця, and Укроборонпром. With Укроборонпроm, it's more complicated because it depends.
Незалежна незалежність, знаєте, оце все. В таких компаніях там спеціальний підхід,
So in such companies there is a special approach, but Укроборонпром is not in compliance at all. It has the worst situation from the point of view of corporate governance. They do not even control their enterprises, so it's really bad situation there. So it has to be redesigned.
ЗУЗЕ, питання призначення директора
With Укрзалізниця, the matter of appointing the director.
Уряд призначає,
but in Energoatom only the full composition of the supervisory board. So in other companies that do not have such legislation, it's just appointed by the majority, so it's the best practice and it has to be made equal. So it is something that is on the surface. But there are some other things that really it's more about application of the law. So for example, the matter of assessment of the supervisory board, it's an important matter. And we have discussed a lot during the working groups.
це
And
не
well,
best
now this
practice. І це
assessment is
взагалі
done by the
законом-
government. This is
законом
not
не
the best
відповідає.
practice, and
Що
that
ще
is
можна?
actually
Що ще треба
not in
написати
compliance with the law
в
at all.
законі,
What else
щоб
has to be
уряд
mentioned
виконував його? Ну, тобто,
in
я
the
не
law
знаю
for
такого
the
наприклад,
government to
виконайте цей пункт
do this?
обов'язково.
So there is no such thing that you
Тепер
have
до
to
вашого
definitely do
питання.
this. Now, getting back to
Цей
your
закон був
question,
прийнятий під час
this
повномасштабного
law was
вторгнення в
adopted during the
24-му
full-scale
році,
invasion
і
in
працювали ми над ним
2024,
весь
and we
23-й,
were
тобто
working
там вже
on
дуже
it
багато
all
компромісів. Деякі
2023.
компроміси вилазять боком. От, і про
It
це
already
про те,
has
що
lots of
говорить Ірина, що
compromises,
там
and
треба
that's what Irina is trying to
позакривати ті
say, that
компроміси, на які
we
ми
need
пішли. Ми пішли на
to
них, тому
cover
що,
those
ну,
compromises
якби
that
він
we
не
have,
проходив.
because
Тобто уряд не хотів, дивіться, уряд не
the
хотів
government
тієї редакції, яка була
did not want
жорсткою. Хотіли знижки, зробили знижки, в результаті знижками скористувалися. Ну,
a
якби така,
discount,
знаєте,
and then
хрестоматійна історія.
so it's something from the book. Оля, please.
Я
Так,
можу
з'їхали
сказати,
одразу
що
по-українськи.
корпораційне
I
будь ласка.
can say,
також в Раді.
I
Це дуже
can
багато
say that
часу
also in
зайняло,
Rada,
щоб
it took lots of
образувати
time
і,
to
зрозуміли,
form
що це
and
зрозуміли
to
депутати, що за цим
understand,
стоїть, що як
for
треба
deputies to
зробити.
understand
Це
this, how
процес.
it can be done. So it's a process.
І будемо працювати далі.
And let's keep on working, because at that particular moment, you know,
на тот момент це було так правильно.
it's always, at that moment, it was correct. And now we are moving on. So that's why each
Це
step,
інші справи,
it's a different regulation, different legislation. That's how it is.
Unfortunately, на жаль, ну ми ж
Ми і так не
Unfortunately, it is like this.
Але ж цікаво.
But it's interesting.
Да. Якщо б не було Дельта-банку, да, тоді
So yes, without
то, можливо,
Delta
б не було
Bank and
цієї
that story with
реформи
Delta Bank,
банківської
maybe we
системи.
will
Це
not
такий був
have all this
тригер
reform
для
of
того,
banking
щоб
system. It
банки
was a
Нацбанку всі
trigger
почали
for us in the
допомагати в цьому
national bank,
участь.
so
А
everyone
якщо
started
воно
helping
не
and
сталося, можливо, воно б так і
participated.
далі вже еврозону.
Without
Тому,
it, maybe it
ці
would still
тригери,
be
вони
like that.
насправді,
So that's why
мені
such
здається,
triggers
можуть
are
бути
actually, well, it seems to me that they can be useful. Well, so far, yes. Укренерго, Енергоатом, yes. What can I say?
Колеги, ну завжди складно почати.
So, well, colleagues, it's always difficult to start, but it's also difficult to end. So, summing up, we had
Значить,
other things here.
в нашому чаті, да, люди писали
In
про
our
те, що
chat,
необхідно,
people
щоб
were
члени
writing
наглядових
that
рад
we need part of the
незалежні
supervisory
та незалежні,
boards
якби
to
ми
be
їх там не класифікували,
independent from the
розділяли
state.
тільки
However, we
які є
classify
власники. Це дуже
them,
важливо,
and so
але
that they have the same
немає
expectations that the
виключно
owners have. But for this, these
Ну,
expectations
і мова
have to be
йде
clearly
про,
formulated and worded.
високі ризики,
And here we are also
пов'язані з тим,
talking
що ми можемо
about
прийняти
hacks
правильні
connected
рішення
with
в
the
умовах
fact that
політичної,
we
військової
can
нестабільності, ми
make
можемо
correct
відкотитися назад.
decisions,
Це
but
також
in
дуже
conditions
велика
of political
проблема, на яку
instability, we
сьогодні треба
also
звернути увагу.
can go back.
Я хотів би перш за все
And it's a
вже,
big problem we need to
вже
draw attention to.
наостанок,
Once
перш за
again,
все, це коли
to
починаємо. Я
finalize,
хотів би подякувати
I would like
команді,
to express my
нашого
gratitude
консорціуму,
to the team of our amazing
Інституту
consortium,
економічних
representatives
досліджень,
of Institute
Центру
of Economic
економічної
Research,
стратегії,
Dixie Group Center of Economic
аналітики і
Strategy,
адвокації,
Institute of
за нашу
Analytics
роботу в
and
консорціумі.
Advocacy
Я хотів би
for our work
подякувати
in
пані
consortium. I would like to express my
Віталію
gratitude to Maria Rybakova,
Роману
Natalie
Ясовичу,
Nabok,
Олександру
Roman
Батлі за
Yasovich, Alexandra
прекрасні
Batli
виступи і за те,
for
що вони
amazing
взяли на себе
speeches
це
and
таке
for
інтелектуальне
taking
наповнення. Це
this
для нас дуже
intellectual
важливо. Моя окрема
intellectual
подяка нашим
component.
прекрасним
My
дискусантам.
separate
Мені здається,
gratitude
що
to
ми
our
отримали
amazing
надзвичайно такий панорамний,
members of the
надзвичайно
discussion. It
бачення
seems to
того,
me
що
that we
відбувається
have now
конкретній
this
сфері,
panoramic
хоча
view of what is going on in this specific sphere, even though it's clear that it is never-ending matter and it can be discussed a lot. So I express my gratitude to representatives of OECD, to Mr. Lisa Zurhausen, Артем Шабальов, Ірина Кравченко, Іван Дубогрес, Олексій Мовчан, Олег Кошарна, and everyone who has joined us here today. Separately, I would like to express my gratitude to International Renaissance Foundation for supporting such professionally oriented things. I would say it's extremely important as of now to gather people that can talk and discuss some specific moments that have to be solved. And once again, I would like to express my gratitude to everyone defending us today on the front line, everyone who's enabling our work here today in such conditions. And I would like to say maybe some very simple words, but I always love saying them when I wrap up some kind of event. We will definitely win. Thank you.